You won't believe this. I talk to a lot of doctors, chiropractors, medical doctors, osteopaths, nurse practitioners, and they're owners of their practice, and they're also a clinician. And a lot of them tell me that they'd like to move away from a clinical role into an executive role. When you're in a clinical role, that is a technical role or a technician role. A technician is the one who's delivering the service and doing the work. An executive is the one who makes sure everything gets executed the right way. So sometimes people think of technicians as mean like a guy who's digging a ditch, or a guy who's laying bricks, yeah, or like a guy who is a pilot of an airplane, even a commercial plane, and he's a captain, but he's a technician. Or a surgeon. A surgeon is a technician. There's nothing wrong with a technician. There's very specialized technicians that have tremendous skills. Thank goodness we have surgeons. If I were to walk out of here today and get hit by a bus, I'd want to be picked up by a helicopter and flown to an emergency room and have a skilled surgeon put me back together. But that is a technical role, a technician role. An executive role is somebody who's working on the business, not in the business. My wife and I read some books by Michael Gerber years ago, and we actually did an E-Myth mastery program for 2 years to create systems. Michael Gerber, the way he looked at it, he said, you're either working in your business or on your business. So let's look at things realistically. Doctors, chiropractors, medical doctors, whoever, nurse practitioners, physical therapists, they get into this role as a technician. They go to school, they get trained, they get licensed, and they're technicians. They're in a technical role. They start to treat. If they're fortunate enough to be able to put together their own business, and chiropractors seem to be the most that way, probably because we were excluded from a lot of medical groups and hospitals years ago. So chiropractors, when they got out of school, they were going to start their own practice. I know when I went to school, if you asked 1,000 chiropractic students, do you want to own your own practice someday? Probably 996 of them or more would say yes. A lot of medical people don't want to run a practice, they just want to work in a good practice. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's all good, honorable work. But somebody has to run the show. Somebody has to be the executive to coordinate the team. So how do you go from a technician role where you're in there working and working into an executive role? You have to look at that from a how it progresses point of view. You're in there, you're building a practice. Let's take chiropractic, for example. A lot of chiropractors know the way you judge your business is how many visits did you do? And I was one of those people. I got up to 425 visits a week just with me, with no associates. That's a lot. That was physically challenging, but I loved it. I was in good shape. I was able to do it. I was younger, and I could see a lot of people. It did beat me up a bit. My wife was one who insisted I get another associate because I was beating my body up and working so many hours. So when I brought an associate on, I thought we were going to double. That wasn't the case. We went up by 100 visits, roughly 125. We went to about 550. That wasn't saying that the associate wasn't good. The associate was really good. She was a great associate. But there were so many other roles that I was covering that when she came on board, it gave me time to start being more of an executive. And then I brought in another associate and we went to 750. And it wasn't that he was better than her. What was happening is as soon as she showed up, I started performing more of the executive actions because I wanted to grow the business. And it grew because I was doing that, and I had 2 good associates, both doing adjustments and treating patients. I still treated, but nowhere near as much as I did earlier. Most people, until they get in the role of being an executive, do not realize how taxing an executive role can be. It's not physically taxing, but it is very mentally taxing. You have to move from one to the other. How do you do it? You have to put systems in place because if you're going to step out of your role, you have to replace yourself. And that is not easy to do. You can't do it unless what you're doing when you treat these patients is somehow written down. Like, how do you treat patients? What kind of care plans do you have people on? Do you even have them on care plans? Are you doing rehab or are you just adjusting them? Are you doing other services? Are you doing decompression? What do you do with that patient with a herniated disc when they come in and they're in a lot of pain? Are you injecting them with opioids or giving them oral opioids? That's not stuff we'd want to do. But we do have systems and we have written them down and broke down what I did as a clinician to get other clinicians to be able to do it. We've created systems for everything. So when a client signs on with us, they bring us on, most times the client is still a technician. They're treating. We tell our clients, don't change anything. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Keep that practice going because it's paying the bills and you want to continue to pay the bills. But let's add this system and we bring in another practitioner, a nurse practitioner or a medical doctor who can do a medical system onto the patients. And as we start doing that, what we started noticing was when they do blah, 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 let's say that's an injection, like a trigger point injection. And it's not with steroids. It's a very natural trigger point injection, usually lidocaine, marcaine, ibuprocaine or very non-invasive safe drugs, tremolysarapin. These things are breaking up adhesions in the muscles. When they would do that, all of a sudden it became easier for us to adjust. That would make it easier for the chiropractor. And as I was stepping back as chiropractor, my associates started noticing when they do these injections, patients are responding faster. So by bringing on a provider who's doing a service that you're not currently doing and allowing them to do that can lighten the load on treating that patient. Now you can hire an associate, and the associate's never going to be as good as you. But then again, when you were an associate, you weren't as good as your mentor either. Your job is to help mentor these associates so they can learn. That's why they call it practice. And they get better and better. But it's easier to do that in a team environment than it is to do it in a solo practitioner environment. So in a medically integrated practice, remember, you have rehab specialists, you have medical providers, you have chiropractors. If you bring on these other providers and you have systems for them to be able to perform what they have to do, and you have systems written for your chiropractic associates on what they have to do, it's easier to start handing these things off. Then your first task as executive is to not completely disconnect, to still have your hand in that, but measure their performance of your associates, and to not be critical of them or criticize them, but to actually encourage them and become a mentor for them and help them to get better. I know a lot of times chiropractors say, I put my heart into mentoring this associate, and then they left and they started their own practice. That can happen. What I've learned is two things. Number one, you have to create the environment that makes it okay for them to stay. And if you don't, they're going to want to go create their own. Systems tend to do that. When all the things are systematized, you're going to have a higher chance of that provider wanting to stay on with you. And if they leave, you just find another one. There are a lot of chiropractors still graduating school, and a lot of them are actually very interested in the integrated model. I know that because I just took my Part 4 of the national boards because I wanted to get my license in Florida, and they wanted me to take the Part 4 of the national board. They wouldn't grandfather me in. So I had to go back and study with students again. And it was a great experience. I learned a lot of things, and I learned what they're teaching chiropractors now. And a lot of them are very interested in the integrated model and the rehab model. And the rehab model we have all the systems laid out, exactly how to do it. So bringing an associate into that environment, you have a higher chance of them staying because of your systems. And if they leave, it's easier to replace them because of your systems. And your medical providers, because you're providing systems and they're not as interested. We go back to that survey, you ask 1,000 medical doctors, do you want to own your own practice someday? It's almost the exact opposite ratio. I don't want to own my practice. I just want to work and practice somewhere where I can get paid for what I do and help people get well. Remember, the ultimate reason why most of us became doctors, at least 80% of us, whatever the profession, physical therapy, chiropractic, medical, was to learn how to help people. And if you can provide that environment where people can make a good living and have a good career, they will stay with you forever. I've had medical doctors stay with me longer than I was with the practice because they bought the practice. I've had nurse practitioners stay with me for over a decade. And it's because you create the right environment where they can thrive, and then they feel like, I like coming to work. I like working for this company because they're good people. If you create that environment, then it's easier for you to step back. Then what you have to do is you have to keep your finger on the pulse of the practice, looking at your key performance indicators, your metrics of how the practice is doing. If you're tracking that, then you can catch out points, and your job is to put training back in. Eventually, you're going to have to hand that off, because if you're doing all the training, there's going to be a point where all you're doing all day long is training, and there's other jobs as an executive you need to do. So as you grow the business, you have to realize you need to systematize the different aspects of the business so that everybody knows their role. And then you need to bring other people in and create an environment where they feel safe and they feel like they can actually reach their own goals, their personal, their professional, and their financial goals. To quote Brandon Dawson, who was brilliant at business, basically helping your employees to achieve that, they will stay with you for a long time. And that idea of being a small practice where people work there and there's not much benefit other than you have a job, that goes away. And all of a sudden they're working for a big place because it's growing. This is exactly how Amazon, how Apple, how Google all grew to be the giants that they are, because they created the environment. Remember, some of those companies started off in their garage. If you can take a company where you're packing books in a box in your garage or your parents' garage, and you can turn that into something like Amazon, you had to have some pretty good systems and some pretty good people working for you. Systems attract people. Systems create an environment where people know their job. And if you share the reward on that because they can perform their job, you'll have people staying with you for a long time. The more you do that, the more you can step back and mentor, and then even get other people trained to help train your employees. So you create the environment that helps people. If you're going to have multiple practices, you should never have your second practice until the first practice is running so perfectly that it's running without you. That means you have to be fully out of the business as a technician and only as an executive. Because if you're not fully out of the business as a technician and you start a second practice, you're going to now have triple the problems, because you're going to be putting out fires here, putting out fires there, and it'll wear you down fast. But if you get it running solely on those systems, and you're managing those systems and executing everything, making sure you're the executive in charge, your practice will grow. And when you get to that point, then you can do two practices. And if you can do it with 2 practices, then you can do it with 3. And if you can do it with 3, then you can start doing it with 5 and 6 and so forth. You can go as big as you want. Your biggest limitation is going to be your belief. But it all starts with how do you remove yourself from the technical role and get more into an executive role. There are stages. In our program, we teach our clients how to do this. And we have had clients go from 0 practices all the way up to 26 practices and everything in between. So if you want 1 practice, but you just want it to run so you can take some time off and spend time with your family, we can help you do that. If you want to have it so that practice runs so well that you have a second practice, we can help you do that. If you want to have 5 practices, we can help you do that. It all begins with systems, and then with systems comes training and the environment for your employees to thrive. It changes. It's no longer all about the client. That's important, but you also have to be concerned with what's it like for your employee. If you want to grow big, you have to create that environment, and that's how you step out of that role, getting others to step in and do your job. And your best thing would be if you get somebody in that role and they start performing better than you did, that's a win, because if you actually created that environment and somebody else could thrive better on it, it's not that they're smarter than you. You gave them the opportunity by handling a whole lot of things that they didn't have to worry about, and you're creating an environment where they could actually have a career there and retire working for you someday. That's what I believe. That's what we help people do. That's what I've seen in business, and that's what I've seen in practice. We can help you with the stepping out of the technical role, becoming more of an executive. I hear from a lot of people that's what they want. If that's what you want, this is how business grows, and this is what we believe in. So thanks for listening. If you want to know more about this, click the link that's somewhere around the border of this picture, and we'll get you connected to hear about our blueprint, which is how we do that with our clients. Thanks.